Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. My name's Claire, and I work at Reading Solutions UK. I am a reading development consultant and also lead on research for the company. Reading Solutions UK are the resellers of Reading Plus in the UK. And I'm also joined by the Director of Teaching and Learning from Aim High Academy Trust, that's Heather March.
Hello.
We're going to be sharing practical strategies related to comprehension, fluency, and how that impacts on Key Stage 2 reading stats. We're going to be looking at 3 sections. So part 1, we're going to discuss the nature of SATs and why comprehension and fluency are so essential, and what common issues can arise when we're looking at those. Part 2, we'll look at our personal experiences with SATs from a teacher's point of view, a school perspective and trust perspective, and where you're seeing the concerns and the struggles. And also we look at the practical strategies that have helped to solve these struggles and how they've been implemented, and how also we've been preparing for SATs this year.
Yes.
So what I'd like to do is introduce Heather.
Yeah.
No, Heather, you all right to tell me a little bit about yourself and your role?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I'm Heather. I'm Director of Teaching and Learning at Aim High Academy Trust. So I've been there just over 3 years. But prior to that, I was Year 6 teacher for 12 years, over 20 years experience as a Key Stage 2 teacher, English lead, Year 6 lead, and I'm also a moderator for the local authority for Key Stage 2 writing as well. So a lot of Year 6 experience. So hopefully tonight we'll be able to discuss some practical ideas for people who are, have lots of experience in Year 6 or quite new to Year 6. There's certainly lots to consider.
Well, that's excellent. Well, I know Heather's got lots of ideas. If you have any queries or questions, we're happy to look at them at the end of the session, just so that we may actually answer the question that you're already asking throughout the session. So when we get to the end, I'll have a look at the any questions that pop up then. So just use your message box. So Heather, can you tell me a little bit about what common barriers that you're seeing that affect children's success with SATs?
Yeah, if I think initially about like post-COVID, I think one of the first barriers we have to think about is confidence and resilience with our children. And I'm certainly speaking from personal experience with some of our Year 6s, it has been that and that building up that confidence and resilience over the past couple of years. A lot of work around mental health and well-being, so that our current Year 6s are in a really good place to tackle the SATs. That's certainly been one big barrier that we've worked hard to overcome. Another one, which is a common barrier and was pre-COVID and post-COVID, is the reading fluency. Just the sheer amount of reading that they have to get through to access the reading paper, but also the reasoning papers as well. That barrier is certainly one we have to have as a top priority. Cognitive overload is another big barrier for us. Again, because of COVID, the amount of content that our Year 6 has missed in lower Key Stage 2 really needs to be considered. And we found that, some of their prior knowledge hasn't been embedded. They've got big gaps in knowledge. So right from the word go in September in Year 6, it's how do you address that and build upon and kind of build in all the Year 3 and 4 objectives that aren't, well, for our children, were absolutely not as secure as we would want them to be. So really that's one of the biggest barriers, I think, for this year in particular. I think current Year 6s, and it's certainly the picture across our trust, it's been that. And teachers saying to us and saying to me, they haven't remembered this, they haven't retained this around this concept. Big concerns around like arithmetic scores, that kind of the basics that they need from lower Key Stage 2. We've had to work really, really hard from September to make sure that all of that is revisited whilst delivering all of the Year 6 content as well. So that's been a big one.
Yeah, thank you. Can you tell us briefly a little bit of information about your current SAT results and how it's improved or changed in previous years and what your expectations are for this year?
Yeah, our SAT results across the trust actually have been really good, and we're really pleased and really positive. Post-pandemic, they have returned to their previous levels, and I think that's because we do have really strong teachers in place, and that we do consider what we were talking about there about retrieval, and closing those gaps. And because of the interventions and the support that we've put in place, we're confident that this year it is going to look like a similar picture, because we've taken into account those barriers that our current year sixes have. So across our trust, they were all in line or above national last year, and we're optimistic that we're heading the same way this year as well.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
So what would you say needs to be prioritised in order to successfully prepare? So if you imagine like perhaps it's your first year in year 6,
Yeah.
you know, what would you
Yeah.
prioritise?
Yes, there's so much, isn't there? But yeah, so first year in year 6, if I was in year 6 in September with my year 6s, first thing would be, right, retrieval. What do they already know? What are their gaps? And really making use of your daily formative assessment. If that's not there, then it's going to continue to be a concern. So priority, really getting to grips with what they already know, and making use of your assessment within the classroom. Secondly, absolutely developing reading fluency and stamina for the tests. And again, from September, from the word go, having that in mind, how do you drip feed that in, and how does that kind of develop over time? If we think about developing reading fluency and stamina, I'm sure lots of people are aware that last year in the reading paper, there were 2,106 words in the reading paper, compared with 1,564 words the year before. So we don't know what this year's is going to look like, of course. There was an uproar about that. But we have to be thinking that these children are going to be expected to read an awful lot. And then that's without all of the words in the questions that they have to read as well. If they don't have good automaticity and reading speed, they're going to really struggle to access it and certainly to complete it. That has always, it's always there at the forefront of our minds. How do they get through that in that hour? So for me, those would be the two biggies to prioritize: retrieval, really getting to grips with what they know and how you thread that through, and your reading fluency and stamina.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely the quantity of text I have to be able to get through is incredible.
Yeah.
What we know from Reading Plus is that we need the children to be reading at 185 words a minute.
Yeah.
By the time they're doing SATs, and that's no mean feat. They have to be going at quite some pace to do that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Trying to encourage that kind of pace to be reading at.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't mind moving on a little bit now and looking at different attitudes towards SATs, because people naturally have different attitudes towards SAT. I know different schools think differently about it. And what's been your experience with the attitudes in the schools that you've worked at and the trust you work at, and an attitude towards the results as well?
I feel like really lucky that I work within a trust, and actually the school I worked in before as well, where I work with very positive, we're really optimistic that we can help the children achieve the best they possibly can, and working with really positive teachers with a positive mindset, because they have to do these tests. So it's about, we have to think, what can we do? And we have to be, we have to have high expectations of our children as well, including our SEN, our disadvantaged children, and we have to think from their starting points, what can we do to make sure that they achieve to the very best of their ability? So I feel very lucky that we have a common attitude like that across the trust, and we have a very we have staff who want the children to do well, and from whatever their starting points are, and they're really kind of enthusiastic about driving their progress. So I feel like I work with staff who are great to work with in that respect. So I feel very lucky with that. Post-COVID, we had a strong sense that we needed to do more and more quickly. So in one of the schools in our trust, so I'm thinking this was 2022, the cohort of year 5, who had moved into year 5, we knew that looking ahead to year 6, we were going to have to do something different for these children, because they were, so our current year 6s, it's when they were in year 5, they were academically very low, high proportion of SEND, high proportion of disadvantaged. So we had to think about what we were going to do a bit differently, and that's when Reading Plus came into that particular school. And I recognised that because I'd used it in my prior prior to that, I'd implemented it in the school where I was year 6 teacher and English lead. So I brought that in. And for those year 5 children, they had 3 terms of Reading Plus. And now they're in year 6 and we were really, really concerned about them. And I was just at a moderation session this morning looking at their practice test results. And they've come out with 82% on track at the moment.
Amazing.
So these are
what were you expecting prior to this?
When they were coming out of year 4 and year 5, and you know, you're thinking, oh, this is the year group where probably Ofsted's going to come as well when they're in year 6, and year 6s have done really, really well, and lovely, lovely year group, but so many challenges and so many barriers. And I said, we need something else here. We were looking at, there was less than half on track, less than half at age related. And we would have been over the moon with them to be in the 60s or 70s, to be honest. So sitting at that moderation this morning and to see that 82% of them passed, I think it was the 2022 paper, but they've already had to go at the 2023 paper as well, actually. And they've improved on that, but that was earlier on in the year. They'll probably revisit that. But really, really pleasing. And there's some like real kind of success stories in there. So when they're in year 5, on average in 2 terms, I've just got this data here as well, because they were a real success story. In 2 terms, on average, children made 1.8 levels of progress. But for some of our disadvantaged pupils in particular, 2 of them made more than 4 levels of gain in those 2 terms. And their reading speeds increased by over 70 words per minute on top of what they could read before. And like you said, prior to that, they would not have finished the test. They would not have been able to access it. And this was a year group where a lot of people were like, they're not gonna be able to access it. They're not going to achieve. And actually, we've got the year 6 teachers feeling really, really confident and really pleased. And in the autumn term, when they got them and gave them a practice test, they were like, I can't believe how well they've done when we knew about this cohort coming through. And that's got to be down to Reading Plus that they had in year 5.
It's amazing. For those of you who don't know about level gains on Reading Plus, 1 level gain is equivalent to a school year's progress in terms of the complexity of text that they're reading. So 4 level gains would be 4 school years progress in terms of complexity of text that they're reading. So yeah, quite significant, I'd say.
Absolutely. And I think it also switched on a lot of those children to reading. So one of our we have a really strong reading curriculum in place in that school. Lots of reading for pleasure, lots of discussion around texts in guided reading lessons, a strong English curriculum. But for those children, they needed that extra. They needed that. That was the missing piece. That was the little missing jigsaw piece that was needed to go in and just really help accelerate their progress. And it really has for us. So they've hit the ground running in year 6 in terms of working on that reading fluency and stamina. And they took those subscriptions into year 6 with them in the autumn term. And we're now replicating that and moving it into the year 5 cohort at the moment.
Excellent.
Have that kind of long-term view.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, what I'd like to know is if your approaches changed or your outcomes to SATs have changed in recent years, and I'm particularly interested in hearing about your quality first teaching approaches.
Yeah, I think in recent years there's been a lot more, certainly that I know of, a lot more CPD in the schools I've worked in around ensuring that quality first teaching is right in our classrooms. And we've done a lot of work around cognitive overload, how we support children through really clear small steps and scaffolding and modelling. And as Director of Teaching and Learning, that's kind of part of my role where I go into classes. We work in triads together as well, to work in collaboration, to share effective approaches. And a big part of that is that formative assessment within the classroom, if we're doing our small steps and our scaffolding, making sure that the learning doesn't move on until children are secure with that knowledge. So when we're working our triads, we then look at that as well and look at the impact on individual children. Across the trust, quality first teaching is really at the forefront really of our CPD, and what people are kind of striving to is to really develop reflective practitioners. And And that only has a positive impact on our children, because teachers are really thinking about how they support those children within the classrooms, including our SEN and disadvantaged children, how those approaches, those small steps, the clear scaffolds, how they support children to access all of the learning, because ultimately they all then access the tests at the end of year 6 as well. So it's kind of how we drive that. So really that's been something that's kind of been ongoing. It's only been since 2018 where, in my role as a year 6 teacher, where we then brought in Reading Plus to further enhance that. And that kind of came about through my son's use of Reading Plus as well. So I was in year 6 when my older son, who was in year 6 at the time, came home with a new piece of homework, which was Reading Plus. And I was sat beside him and I thought, I need to find out more about that. And that's kind of where it went from there, because for my year 6s, we had, like I say, an excellent English curriculum in place. But by implementing that as well, it really helped to accelerate the progress within my own class. So I can see it from like the perspective of me being in the class and now supporting teachers across the trust as well. If we get the quality first teaching right, it's then what we supplement that with. But the teaching absolutely needs to be first and foremost, really, the best it can be in our classes.
Yeah, excellent. Because we know Reading Plus is a fabulous tool and how it can support pupils' understanding of the Key Stage 2 reading content domains. Have you used that in school?
So what we make sure that staff are really kind of well informed about the programme. So with the implementation of Reading Plus, the training is fantastic. But then I take it upon myself as well to monitor and make sure teachers understand how best to use it. So, for example, the year 5 teachers who are using it at the moment, I've booked in a session with them next week because they haven't used it for a while. So I will go through with them how to use the diagnostic tools. So on the programme, you can see the content domains and where children are doing really well or where they're struggling. And what we want teachers to do is to use that assessment and inform to help them plan their guided reading sessions. So if there's a particular area they struggle with, for example, recognising kind of themes across different sections of a text, then they really need to be using that assessment to inform their guided reading, their reading objectives in their English lesson, just like they would use any other form of assessment. So if they're using Reading Plus, it's not just a kind of, we're going to give it to the children and leave it and assume it's all going well. It's about how they are using it as a teacher on the teacher dashboard so that they're constantly monitoring children's progress, but using that to support and help them, whether it's on a one-to-one basis or a whole class issue.
How would you recommend that schools could do this without using Reading Plus?
Without Reading Plus, like I say, in the school prior to where I am now, I felt that we had very strong things in place for English, fantastic quality text. So you must have quality text in place. You've absolutely got to have daily, if possible, guided reading lessons where you are modelling how to answer questions. You need to be modelling that oracy, how to read with fluency and expression. And you would need to be really getting the children to echo that back, to do some choral reading, to make sure that they're practicing their fluency. In terms of, because we've tried other reading resources as well, but in terms of that automaticity and speed, I find it very difficult to teach that explicitly, as in the actual skill of reading, how you read with kind of real focus and stamina. For my year 6s, the need of that, and I'm thinking of the current year 6s I'm talking about as well at one of our schools. All of that was in place, and that's so important, especially here in the teacher modelling with expression, what good reading looks like. But ultimately they need to be reading with real speed and fluency whilst understanding at the same time. It's difficult without something like that, I think, for those children who aren't already able readers. and for children who don't read a lot at home, or who don't read a lot for pleasure. My two sons, I mean, I hate saying this, but they don't love reading as much as, and I absolutely love reading. And they've both used it. My oldest son, who's doing his GCSEs now, and my youngest, who is in year 6, and they absolutely recognise the purpose of it and how it's a skill of reading, and they've been done absolutely great. And I think it's down to that, because it kills me that they don't pick up a book and want to
Yeah,
read.
I know. My daughter's the same.
I can't believe it.
So what have you been doing this year? What are you and your school's been doing this year, particularly to plan for SATs?
So it was very much for this year in particular, thinking about just this year and this current cohort of year 6s. We had to work with teachers to think, right, what is it from the year 3, 4 and 5 curriculum that we need to revisit and thread in? Then we thought about where we're going to do the practice tests and how are they going to be planned out each term, and what we're going to do with that information. So that's what we've been making sure that staff are using the information from the assessments to feed into their planning. We've made sure that we've got a really close eye on progress, so we do lots of internal moderation. As a year 6 moderator, I'll go in and offer that support in terms of the writing as well. We, at the start of the year, do our predictions and estimates sheet. So all the year 6 staff, predictions and estimates for the year, but we revisit those at every pupil progress meeting, which is termly as well, to see if it's altered or do we have more children on track. We've got really strong internal processes like that in place, so nothing's hidden. We know exactly who our concerns are, who our target children are. In each of the schools in the trust, I have worked with some target children as well. So last half term, we had a bit of a writing focus to kind of push them up a little bit. But this half term and the start of next, it's reading and maths. And I've gone in and done a little bit of work with some maths intervention groups as well. So this year, we've been making best use of our assessment information and making sure that any booster groups interventions are planned in as soon as possible, and the support given so that those children aren't kind of lost along the way, and anybody who needs anything additional is identified as soon as possible.
Yeah, you mentioned to me something previously about kind of the drip feed,
Yes.
of like collars and things like that.
Yeah.
Tell everyone about that.
Yeah, so talking about kind of using information from assessments, I'm just thinking of a particular incident earlier in the year where our year 6 teachers had given the children a SPAG test. And one of the main questions that the vast majority of the class got wrong was about apostrophes and the use of plural apostrophes. And the year 6 teachers, that's like, it's a year 4 objective. And I was like, yeah, but remember that this is what they'll have touched upon, but clearly they've forgotten. So you don't want to, use loads of time going over prior objectives, but how do you drip feed it in? So on a morning, our staff use morning starters, and that's when they come in on a morning. There'll just be a range of questions on the board, whether they're maths focused or SPAG focused. And it's about how you just, over a number of days, there would always be an apostrophe question in there, or in your reading, you'd just be really mindful to pick out and spot the apostrophes when you're reading. Oh, look, how is that apostrophe being used there? Doing some deliberate mistakes on the board, getting the children to spot them. But without you making best use of assessment, that would have been missed. So it's about making sure that those little errors are then just threaded in, and you don't need necessarily a specific whole lesson on it. If it's something that is just to jog their memory again, because for a lot of them, they're like, oh yes, I'd just forgotten. So it's about just jogging their memory. And that's true of loads of arithmetic objectives as well. Not lots of new content, but thinking about the things that they should have been embedded in year 3 and year 4, which would have been taught but just have been lost because they're trying to hold so much in their head. There's so much content that they have to try and hang on to. Of course, they're going to forget them.
So we're just heading to our last few minutes now.
Oh,
and I'm just wondering if you could summarise any key takeaways for SATs preparation for our attendees, and particularly thinking about any quick wins that they could apply.
Yeah.
Next few months.
Yeah, spinning so many plates. I know in year six, I absolutely know that it's really difficult to think, right, what am I? It's like whack-a-mole as well. You know, you concentrate on one area and something else goes. So in terms of quick wins, for me, if we're talking about from now to SATs, because we're at this point in the year and we've got about 6 weeks of teaching time left. For me, if I was in the year six classroom now, I'd be prioritising arithmetic practice, and putting in as much practice for that as I could, even just in short chunks, like 4 or 5 questions at a time. I would be talking to the children to make sure that they're involved in choosing focus areas to work on. I would be focusing on reading and maths, keeping the writing ticking over, but focusing on reading and maths because that's what they're going to be tested on in 6 weeks' time. I would be using extracts from past papers for my guided reading sessions, to model and to talk through how I would answer those questions, especially the 3 markers and the 2 markers. I would model how I would do that, and so they can really see how they're going to access it. And I'd be celebrating loads of small steps of progress as well between now and then, to make sure that they're that the children are fine and they're not stressed going into SATs. So celebrating those small steps of individual progress, so and just trying to keep them motivated and enthusiastic, and thinking over Easter as well, how you can provide something for them which isn't going to feel too onerous, because they need a break as well. But I know for my son, over Easter in year 6, there'll be little bits of reading plus, but just little and often. The maths practice that he's being provided with, again, just little and often, because they are only 10 and 11 as well, and we'll have to think about spacing that out.
Are there any specific tips that you'd give the children for how they may approach the test paper, but also any tips for the day itself? You know, some people here might be experiencing SATs day for the SATs week for the first time.
Definitely, yeah. And after spending 12 years in year 6, you develop like your own little kind of routines and things. So for example, for the reading paper, I would always kind of teach them that, think about it in those 3 chunks. And for some children who get overwhelmed by the amount, I would also be like, even cover up part of the paper, some of the questions, so that you're just really focused on one area. You can talk to the children about the order in which they do the texts, because we know that they get progressively harder. For your real great depth children, you could have that conversation with them about that last extract. If they're really confident and really able, do they want to get in there first and do some of the harder questions? But I think it has to be what they feel confident with, and what you've talked to them about, and what you've modeled with them in the practice tests as well. So there should be nothing new or nothing that you haven't already practiced with them. Similarly, you know, with the maths, I would always advise you focus on the ones you can do. If there's anything that worries you or you're stuck on, you just move on and you come back to it later. On the day itself, it's just about preparation, and first of all, having that calm start of the day. We would always invite the children in earlier, have some breakfast, have a chat, play a bit of music, think about the time the test's starting, so you can have a little bit of a debrief with them, or work through a few revision questions with them, but not to the extent where it worries them. So not throwing in questions that are too difficult. Maybe just some short bursts, some little quizzes. Have your resources ready, have everything ready, and have loads of spare pencils. You don't want to be sharpening a pencil in the middle of a test, just give them a new pencil. So preparation is absolutely key, so everyone's calm, and that the children aren't surprised by anything on the day, that you've already prepped them and talked them through the routines. And I have found that actually the year 6s I've had, weirdly, by the Friday, often say, I've loved this week, because they felt really special. They've had a breakfast every day, and then you're planning nice activities on the afternoon. So ultimately, we want them to make it feel like something they can tackle and something they can achieve. So mindset is a massive thing as well.
Thank you so much, Heather. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Heather, is there somewhere where people will be able to see you on social media, or anything where they could potentially tap in a conversation?
Not currently, no.
Well, if you do have any questions, you're welcome to come directly to us. You will have a copy of the presentation sent to you, a copy of the video sent to you, and our details beyond that. So if you do have any quick, burn a hole in your side, then do come back to us, and one of us will be able to come back to you with some advice or guidance. If you are interested in looking at Reading Plus, it wasn't about this, but if you are interested, do come on to the Reading Solutions UK website, because there's information that you might find useful on there as well.
Yeah, I mean, it has made an impact for our children. Absolutely. It definitely has. Mm.
Well, all that's left to say is thanks again. Thank you to Heather. Thank you for
Thanks,
joining
Claire.
us as well. And all the very, very best of luck with SATs coming up.
Yes.
Take care of
Good luck.
yourselves. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks.